Hey guys, so hadn't been doing the whole camera filming thing in a while, but I'm planning on starting to do these every Saturday after I get back from the gun range, after I do my normal shooting routine, my weekly maintenance on my uh, gun handling and everything. So, with that being said, getting into this video, we're going to talk getting into ELR shooting and probably the easiest way to do it. Um, so this rifle here, y'all seen it before. It's a 6.5 PRC, and I've kind of got it set up just strictly for long range shooting. Just to show you, it is unloaded. The magazine's just in there just for effect, but it's unloaded. Okay, so if you don't know about this gun, it's a total custom build. This is a preferred barrel, and it is a straight taper. I believe it's 1.125 inches, or I believe it's not an inch and a quarter or 1.2, but 1.125, like an inch and a fifth or something like that. Got a APW, Axis Precision Works brake. I do have a 20 MOA rail on here, pick rail, and then I have a spur mount, and it's in an MDT XRS chassis. The barrel had the extra hand lap treatment done on it from the manufacturer, from Preferred Barrels. The bolt and action and barrel, as far as I know, of course, I didn't build this rifle. It was kind of a trade-off deal, and I received it with, it had like about 60 rounds through it at the point that I got it. And from what I understand, the guy that built it and everything said that the action bolt and everything had been blueprinted to the barrel, and all that. And it shoots amazing. It shoots pretty incredible groups most of the time. Occasionally, like right now, it's got about 120, 130 rounds through it since I've cleaned it last, and it's starting to show loss of accuracy, and you can see that here, right here on this. This is at 100 yards, and we're looking about an inch and a quarter group on that. So it's starting to show its loss of accuracy. With the two flyers that I had, if you don't count those, I mean, it's still 3/4 MOA, 3/4 of an inch, more or less. With that being that, it looks like 7 shots went into 3/4 of an inch, and then the other 2 went outside of that. And you can tell what I'm talking about there, if you want to look at that. So, alright, so let's get into a little bit of ballistics. So with the 6.5 PRC and the ammunition that I'm running, which is the Norma 143 grain Golden Target match ammo, and it has a G1 BC of 635 and a G7 of 321. So if I calculate that for 100 yard zero, given my scope, this is the new Arkin EP5. This is the 7 to 35 by 56, so it's got lots of zoom power, all the way up to 35 power, and it's actually really, like, they have stepped their game up. My other EP5, the normal 5 to 25 power, the glass clarity in it does not compare to the glass clarity in this one. I don't know what they've changed. Maybe they got a different batch of the glass. But supposedly both of them have the Japanese HD glass in them, but I'm going to tell you the 7 to 35 power one definitely has a little higher grade of that glass as far as clarity goes. I almost want to compare this to the Athlon Cronus that I was running on this rifle, but that Athlon Cronus, is more than twice the value. Like, as far, if you're going to buy one, you're going to spend $1,800 to $1,900 for that scope, and the Arkin EP5 with the 7 to 35 power, this scope here, you're gonna spend about $800. So you're going to spend twice as much money to get the Athlon Cronus, but the glass is just maybe a hair, like it's slightly better. I mean, it's pretty negligible at this point. It's noticeably better than the 5 to 25 power that I have, and way better than the 4 to what was it, the 4 to 24 powers, the SH4 Gen 2s that I've had. I've had a couple of those, and you know, the Athlon just blows those out of the water, but it's a little better than the 5 to 25, and I mean, they are pretty neck and neck with this 7 to 35 power. But anyways, this scope features 32 mils of total elevation range, okay? And so for the most part, what that's going to mean for you as a shooter, if you have a 0 MOA rail and just a standard set of scope rings, just it's 0 MOA, you are more or less going to get about 16 mils. You're going to get half of that as far as your usable elevation range. You're going to get about 16 mils of usable elevation range in your elevation turret, and that's because the way these things are set up, you get 50%. You get 50% up, 50% down. So depending on the rifle, it's going to vary just a little bit, but typically you're going to get half of it. It may be a little more. You might get 51% up or 53% up or something, and like 49 down or 47% down, something like that. But you're going to be about that 50% mark, you know, for all practical purposes. So if we had this rifle set up that way, if we had it set up with a 0 MOA rail and a standard set of rings, basically, you know, just a 0 MOA tilt on the scope, that 16 mils with this particular cartridge, with the BC and the velocity that I'm running, will get me out to about 1,600 yards. It's, you know, calculated, it says 1,630 yards is where I would run out of elevation adjustment, 1,630. Okay, so that's a little under a mile. You know, a mile is 1,760, so you're going to be running about 130 yards short of a mile as far as your adjustment goes. Now, the way to set it up to get like more range out of that, which is what I've done with this. This is not going to be a gun. It at this point, with the 20 MOA base and the spur mount, which is 44.4 MOAs, so that is 64.4 minutes of angle total, and you could probably see it. You know, 60 minutes of angle is equal to 1 degree of cant, so you could probably optically see this in the video you're looking through right now. So it actually is impossible for this to have a 100 yard zero, and I'm about to get into that. So this is more or less like, this is set up so that I can get the maximum range out of this thing, like the most possible range. And of course I could change the base and get more cant out of it and stuff. You know, I could go to a 30 or even like a 50 MOA base and put this on here. But I still want it semi-usable out to 100 yards. And so here, this is what I've got going on. So this was my aiming point at 100 yards, and I shot this group up here. It's a 9-shot group, because that's all the ammunition I had left. And I went ahead and measured that after I shot it, after I got home, and I measured it from the center point of the dot to the center of the group as best as I could figure, because, you know, with these 2 shots that fell out of the group, that kind of throws you off. You know, it kind of is unexpected, especially for a gun like this that shoots this good. I mean, we were holding a really good group. You know, we got 5 shots in this tiny little spot right here, which is about 0.3 minutes of angle, maybe between 0.25 and 0.3 MOA, and then all of a sudden it kind of blew up a little bit. But again, the gun has not been cleaned in 120, 130 rounds, so that could be part of the problem. And I'm also shooting factory Norma ammunition. These are not my hand loads. My hand loads typically do way better than this as far as consistency goes. They're definitely more consistent. But anyways, I measured from here to the center of that group, and I got 7 5/16 on using a measuring tape. And so if you convert that to a decimal, that's 7.3125 inches, give or take. So we'll just call it 7.3 inches at 100 yards. That is my zero at 100 yards. I am 7.3 inches high. Okay, so you can go into a ballistic calculator and you can use the muzzle velocity and the BC, whether G1 or G7, you can use both of them. And so I did the calculations both ways using the G1 and the G7, and we calculated the zero, and both for G1 and G7 I come up with a 460 yard calculated zero. That's based on how high it's shooting at 100 yards, I have a 460 yard, give or take a couple yards. That's where my zero's at. Okay, so from there, because I've dialed the scope all the way down to the bottom, I have the entire 32 mils of elevation that I can run up. Okay, so I can just I can crank this thing at full 32 mils up, because I'm already at the bottom of the elevation range for my zero, and I'm already shooting high at 100 yards. So my zero, again, I calculated at 460 yards. So from my 460 yard zero, I can dial this up 32 mils, okay? And that extends my range. If you want to go with G1 BC, it extends my range to 2,360 yards. Again, that's a calculated range. And then if I use the G7, it's 2,320 yards. So there is a little variation between G1 and G7 once you get past a mile or so, once you really get past that sonic barrier. But I'm still shooting. I have the ability to dial this up enough to get me on target at 2,300 yards. Of course, that is going to require some actual field testing, because in my experience, as cool as it is to shoot 100 yards and zero your gun at 100 and then kind of figure up your math from there based on your muzzle velocity and your BC and stuff, until you actually break it out past 1,000 yards, you will find that, once you get past 1,000 yards, that's going to change. And in my experience, this is saying 2,300 plus yards. I'm going to imagine that it's really going to run out of, it's probably going to run out of adjustment right around 2,300, or sorry, not 2,300, but probably around 2,000. It's probably going to be somewhere between 100 to 300 yards less than what the calculations is showing as far as the actual range goes, in my actual adjustment range. And there's a couple of things that go into that. One is the error in adjustment. So it's almost impossible to get a scope that adjusts 100%. Like I dial it up 32 mils and actually get an actual 32 mils of elevation out of it. From what I understand, the Arkans, especially if you watch Taborosaurus Rex, the Rex Reviews guys, he's got a really, really solid system for testing the accuracy in the adjustment, so how precise it adjusts. And from what I understand, the Arkan scopes are more or less about 99%. Almost 100, but it's kind of hard to give it a 100% score. But from what I understand, they're about 99%, which is really good. That's top tier precision there. That's the same precision you're going to get out of a $5,000 scope. And that's what Arkan really strives to do. First and foremost, they're all about precision tracking. That's more important than how good the glass is, because actually, from what I found, is the tracking in the Arkan scopes, even the SH4s that have, pretty subpar glass in them, they track better than that $2,000 Athlon scope that I've got. The Athlon, to me, I think is tracking about 97%, 96 to 97%. They got about a 4% error of, margin of error there. and it doesn't really show up until you're having to dial past about 10-15 mils, and then you start to notice it, and you start to add a little extra click here and there just to make it work right. But with the Arkans, I've not had that issue. You know, if you run your ballistic software, or you know, you calculate up where you need to be to get to 1,000 yards or something, and you dial it there, they pretty much are just on point. Like, I've not had that issue. So I'm gonna say they're 99% plus as far as their tracking precision. So that being said, to get this thing out and shoot it, you know, it's obviously not a hunting rifle. This thing is over 20 pounds, and it's a 6.5 PRC, so the recoil is like nothing, especially with that big monster brake on the front of it. But at the same time, it's not something you're going to want to lug around in the hunting woods. This is purely set up for shooting long range. You know, I take it to the range and I kind of figure out, okay, I'm shooting this high at 100 yards. You know, and I actually took it out to 300 to maybe get a more accurate scale, but then it was shooting so high at 300 yards. It was shooting over the target, and I couldn't really tell where it was hitting at. And so I brought it back to 100 and did the 100-yard shoot with it, and then calculated from there. What I really would like to do to get a little more data on it before we take it out and go long range is I really would like to do the same target setup. You know, tape a couple sheets of paper together, take it to 200 and shoot it, and then do another set of target and take it to 300, one that's tall, because at 300 I'm shooting about 3.5 feet high, and then measure each one of those and then plug those in to the ballistic software. Say I'm hitting this high at 100, but I'm also hitting this high at 200, and I'm also hitting this high at 300, and from there I can actually adjust my BC to where it's actually the correct BC for this rifle. And that's a whole other like rabbit hole that, you know, you guys are probably gonna, if you're into long range shooting, you will need to get into that rabbit hole at some point, because the manufacturer of these bullets, they can post the BC online all they want and the velocity online all they want, but you really need to figure it out for your rifle. If you're going to have a set of ballistic tables that are going to be perfect all the way out to, say, a mile or something, you're going to need to know what the BC actually is for your rifle. And every rifle's a little different. The rifling and everything, when it engraves that bullet, when it's fired in down the barrel, it changes the BC, you know, and your powder charge, the type of powder you're using, you know, because the back of that bullet's it's gonna get deformed a little bit, you know, when you're setting off 65,000 psi behind it. That copper jacket's only going to handle so much of that, and it's going to probably kind of deform a little, and your BC is going to change. And if you're running bullets with polymer tips, I mean, there's so many variables that go into this. It's just absolutely insane, and I'm only just scratching the tip of the iceberg, you know, as far as my knowledge goes. So, yeah. But this rifle setup, I'm hoping, you know, it'll get me 2,000 plus yards this way. The downside to it is I'm shooting about 7.3 inches high at 100 yards. And so that's more or less just something I'm going to have to know if I'm going to shoot inside, you know, around 100 yards, or say even 200 or 300. Like I said, it's shooting like 3 feet high at 300 yards. I'm just going to have to know that, you know. I'm going to have to keep track of it and say, hey, you know, if I need to make a shot on a target that's that close in, I'm going to be like, hey, I need to aim this far low in the scope and use a reticle and be like, hey, you know, it's shooting 4 mils high at 300 yards. I need to bring that thing down 4 mils in the reticle to be able to make that shot accurately. Otherwise, I'm going to miss or shoot way high and that sort of thing. So I kind of just wanted to go over that. Again, this is just like first one of the videos that I'm going to try to get back into doing this whole video thing. And I don't know, I've just been a little unmotivated lately, and I just don't like getting in front of cameras and talking about stuff. But if you want to get into some technical stuff, I'd be glad to do that for you. Send me some questions in the comments if you've got any, as far as setting up a rifle for extreme range, because I'm able to get this to 2,000 yards without the need of like one of those Charlies, the TACOM HQ Charlie Terex or whatever. I'm able to get out there with this scope and this rifle setup, and it just comes down to the amount of cant that I've got. But again, the downside to the setting it up this way is that you're inside, say inside 500 yards, or inside 400 yards, I'm going to be hitting high, and depending on the range, I could be hitting real high, like at 300 yards shooting 3 feet high, or I could be at 100 yards shooting over 7 inches high. And so that's things you got to keep track of, putting your dope books and all that. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure you guys know what the heck I'm talking about, and that I'm not just setting up my rifles all willy-nilly for no reason. But this is just so like we get back out there on the pipeline. I do have a spot that will allow me to shoot up to 2,000 yards, and I want to make sure that I've got enough adjustment range to get there without having to have any extra tackle and parts. I could have you could go with the zero MOA setup, zero rail, and a normal set of rings, and you could just buy a Charlie Terex, and they're about what, $1,500–1,600 or something like that, and put that on there, and then it'll instantly give you however much elevation you want, up to like, I don't know, 150 mils or something. It's pretty wild. And with that you get way out there. But again, that's something for the future. I do want one of those. I just don't, it's just not something that I'm super motivated to get right now. But anyways, we'll see you guys next time in the next video. Thanks for watching.